Where did it vanish?
Must have been above hell.
Okay? Now look at this Midrash Rabbah, the same Midrash Rabbah. Look what it says now to Moses. To Moses, the same Moses who heard the divine voice in his own head. His subjectivity being this most beautiful prism that guided a nation. Look what Moses says before his death. According to Midrash, right? This is not Torah. Before his death, Moses pleaded with God, saying, Lord of the universe, the mind and soul of each of your creatures is revealed to you. And you know that your children's mind and souls differ from one to the other. Before I depart, heed my plea and find them a leader who will treat each of them according to his or her own temperament. Guys, individual sanctity, individual attitude to reality, the individual makeup of each Jew in this attempt to create a harmonious Jewish life is part and parcel of the evolution of Judaism. What I want to remind you now is that only once you make the mistake of misinterpreting unity as uniformity, then when dogma, at that point dogma enters the stage.
When did the ultra-Orthodox stray away from this? I mean, because everything...
It's not, I don't want to call names, because to say that it's all for Orthodox is an incredibly,
No.
it will be incredible injustice.
No, when did they stray away from it? They all look the same.
They did not stray away from it. There is an integral part, there is a need in the human mind, in human discourse, to try and create dogmas. There is a need in the human mind to close your mind. There is a need to know the path and do just that. Every theological structure has those kinds of people, and I don't want to undermine their importance. And I don't want to oversimplify their theology. Ultra-Orthodoxy, again, there is no such thing as one unified Ultra-Orthodoxy. Anybody who knows a little bit about them knows that they are as disparate from each other as any other branch in Judaism. And the battles between them, you can write books on them. Just like there is no one orthodoxy, there are those who will try to persuade you and others, but mainly themselves, that they are the result of the right path. That's a human need. What I'm trying to show you today, guys, is that this notion of diversity and pluralism is embedded within the evolution of Judaism from a very early stage. That this perception that the rabbis thought that everybody is ignorant, that they should be able to come to terms with one idea and to do one thing, is not necessarily correct. Now, I do want to make the distinction between what you called orthodoxy and orthopraxy, because that's an important distinction. But now we're talking about applicable truth and not absolute truth. And applicable truth doesn't have anything to do with the mind of God. We already discussed that. Okay, so I want us to remember now. If we talk about the mind of God now, and about the role of man, or the human, in the mind of God, we come to a completely new place. Diversity is part and parcel of the theological intent. You were created unique, because it is only through that uniqueness that we can eventually celebrate the fuller scope of the divine potential. So now I want us to flip the page back to page 2 and look at a wonderful Hasidic story, or a folk tale. You say it says individual sanctity, there is a story here at the center. Rabbi Ber of Radovich once said to his teacher, the seer of Lublin. Have you heard about the seer of Lublin, Chozemi Lublin, one of the great sages of their early Hasidic period? Show me one general way to the service of God. Now guys, had I stopped this, most people are not familiar, say Hasidism, they're all dressed, you just said it. They dress alike, they look alike, da-da-da-da-da. You say, okay, I'll show you one way to work God, and this is look at the answer. The tzaddik replied, it is impossible to tell men what way they should take. For one way to serve God is through learning, another through prayer, another through fasting, and still another through eating. Everyone should carefully observe what way his heart draws him to, and then choose this way with all his strength. In other words, what does this Hasidic forte tell us about meaning making? Where does meaning come from? From the individual and from the inside. It's an inner mechanism. This is why I think there is a beautiful way of making the analogy between the Mount Sinai of the mind and the Mount Sinai of the land. This objective communal event, which is part of our narrative, but once you go deeper, the call for each individual to aspire to become the Moses of their own lives, to climb that mountain. And I want to remind you something beautiful about the Mount Sinai event. Something which I find beautiful. It is a God who tells you, if you climb, if you make the effort to climb, I'll make the effort to descend. There is something beautiful about Mount Sinai. It is a midway. God doesn't ask you to let go of humanity and become divine, and God doesn't ask itself to become human. It meets you halfway. It says, if you make the effort and climb, I'll make the effort and come down, and we'll meet on top of Mount Sinai. Therefore, the tallest or the highest point on earth, in that respect, is not Mount Everest, but rather the tallest person who stood on top of Mount Everest.
What is the effort?
To climb.
What is climbing?
In my opinion,
not actually climbing a mountain. Like, what is the climbing?
The climbing
that actually creates that connection where we're being met.
The climbing.
Delving in the
Again, depends who you ask. Depends who you ask. For me, when I hear climbing, it's really to, first of all, a lot of we can talk about the symbolism of that. It's a lecture unto itself. But the idea of coming face to face alone with divinity, in my opinion, is that point where you really let go of the masks, let go of the noise, let go of the very rich world which you have created for yourself in order to distract yourself from the true questions of life. And getting to a point where silence, by virtue of being silent, can deafen you for eternity. Well said. Now, I'll give you an example. Somebody said it once, I don't remember who, but it's definitely not mine, so I'm quoting someone else. He said the following thing. He said, people are very scared to leave the comfortable and the known and to either climb or sail to a new land, to a promised land. It's very scary but there is a point that is scarier than the point of leaving the known, of sira basar, that pot of meat, and that the Israelites said to Moses, we are left with nothing. There is one point that is even scarier than that. It's that point in the middle where you no longer see the land from whence you came, yet you have no conceivable knowledge of the land to which you're going to go. In other words, at this point, you're truly naked. And that's a leap of faith. Where do you go? Do you go back? Or do you move on? At this juncture, the mountain, you're really naked. And I find it fascinating that Mount Sinai happens at such a juncture. Where you're naked. You left. You're not going back. You still have no idea where is that promised land, if you're ever going to make it, if you're going to die in the process. Now, the real questions about life come to bear. And I really believe that in meaningful, that human beings, if they are honest, everybody has to climb their Mount Sinai. They have to. You have no choice.
Can I ask you something? Why is it that the text? Okay, I'm just reading in the text.
Yeah.
It says clear that God says to the people, tells Moses to instruct the people not to climb the mountain, not to approach the mountain, to set boundaries around the mountain, and he repeats it again and again and again. So somehow there is a contradiction. I mean, there is not a there could be. You are saying be your own Moses. In other words, become a Moses. But also we are told that there is one Moses that there is only one Moses, and there will always be only one Moses forever and ever.
Right.
So, where do you get this idea that we should climb Mount Sinai?
First of all, I get this idea from the very notion that I accept the Torah, not necessarily as a divine word, but I accept the Torah as a multifaceted text.
Yeah, not as divine.
You're doing what?
Even if I take not as a divine document, but just as a text.
So I'm looking at it as a multifaceted text. So I'm coming and saying there are many levels of appreciation of text of that. I find it a very profound text. I'm not looking at this a secular way, but and for example, the way I come and say, how about if the Torah suggests to us, and by the way, I'm not original on what I'm saying. What about if the Torah suggests to us two stories that run parallel to each other and they're bound by the same narrative or by the same words? You know, there's a depth here, like a matrix. And if you read the Pshat, you see there is one mountain, one Moses, here's voices, blah, 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 coming down, giving them to the people, it's all nice. If you go deeper, I can take exactly the same command that God says, tell the others not to climb the mountain. Come and say, maybe they don't need to. Maybe they don't have to be distracted by a real mountain, but rather focus on their own mountain. Maybe God says to them, do not fool the landscape of the soul by distracting yourself with the landscape of the world, which is what we always do. Okay, interpretation, I'm just giving you an offer. All I'm saying is, there are multiple ways of looking at the same text. The assumption you are making, however, and I want to put it, is dangerous. And that assumption